And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Benched with Bubba, episode 822. Continuing our team-by-team previews to get you ready for the 2026 fantasy baseball season. We're going to wrap up the NL East with the Philadelphia Phillies, likely the best team in the NL East at this point in time. We'll see. We'll figure that out throughout the show tonight. But to help me break down this team, you can find this individual over at rotowire.com. He hosts the RotoWire podcast. He hosts the RotoWire. He helps host the RotoWire Sirius XM stuff, MLB Network with Todd Zola and friends. There's a lot of stuff that this gentleman takes part in. I've had the pleasure to be on his show on RotoWire. I have met him in Arizona. Lots of great stuff there. And you can find him on the old Twitter at Erik_Halterman. Erik Halterman, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well. Excited to make my Bench with Bubba debut, and excited to talk about a team that is actually still pretty good, despite the fact that I think most Phillies fans are feeling pretty down right about now. Maybe that's what happens when your closest rival just adds three big pieces within a week. Meanwhile, you bring back your 57-year-old catcher. But I think there's a lot of talent on this Phillies team that we'll be talking about today.
Yep, a lot of talent. You guys have spent the money in recent years. You can't spend it every year unless you're the Dodgers. So sometimes you just got to rest on what's got you there and hope it continues to do so. Before we talk Phillies, though, I mentioned RotoWire, MLB Network Radio, all that stuff. Let everybody know what you have going on, where they can find you, and your busy schedule.
Yeah, as you mentioned on Twitter at Erik_Halterman. That's Erik with a K. I don't know Erik with a C, but I'm sure he's got good takes as well. I do my writing at rotowire.com. The RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast just did an episode with Jeff Erickson today, talking about some differences between the two of us in the latest RotoWire Roundtable rankings, which are over there. And like you said, I do Sirius XM radio as well. Once that fully switches over to baseball, I'll be on probably Friday and Saturday if I've got the same schedule as last year.
Beautiful. Can't wait to check it all out. Jeff's always great for everything he does. He'll be previewing the Reds here in a week or so. So we will have him on the show to get that one on. But let's talk Phillies. And let's just kick it off with the basic question. How do you feel 2025 went as a Phillies fan?
Well, again, most Phillies fans are not feeling all that happy, and that's because when your team's pretty good in the regular season, then you lose in the playoffs. It's not a good way to end the year. I think this is a thing, though, as baseball fans, we tend to over focus on the playoffs. We forget that we just had a really good time watching this team for 6 months. Just because we had one bad week at the end doesn't mean the whole season actually was bad. I think this is a pretty good Phillies team that I enjoy watching, and I don't think they're going to win next year because they're not as good as the Dodgers, but I think they're going to be competitive. It's a frustrating season, I think, especially the way it ended too, with the terrible error from Orion Kerkering. I think it just leaves a bad taste in everyone's mouths, and nobody's really being all that objective about this team, which again is still a pretty good team. There's a lot of good players, even some exciting young players coming up next year, hopefully. So I think that I don't feel quite as negative about the Phillies as a lot of Phillies fans do. But, part of that's probably because I'm now living in Chicago for the last several years. So I'm not just surrounded by Philadelphia negativity. I think that probably does a number on you. So I understand where that's coming from as well. It was a season where Phillies did not achieve all their goals, even if they gave us good baseball for 6 months.
Yeah, oh so close. And yeah, it was a shame to watch it in. Trust me. Over here, anytime, whoever's playing the Dodgers is usually I'm a fan of at that moment. So I remember watching it and it was a great game, great series, just happened to go the way it did. And yeah, it sucks for everything involved, but it was, just a mental error. It happens. Unfortunately, it's baseball. One little thing is all it takes. And I still think the Phillies are going to be just fine, which we will talk about now, kicking it off with the hitters as usual. And we will go to Trey Turner, the leadoff man for the Phillies. And he's 33. It's like he's been around for a long time. And I always get surprised when I see 33, but then you look back and like, yeah, okay, he's played for quite a bit. 15 homers last year, got up to 36 steals, the most he's had since 2018. And he hit 304, which is the big part as well. When you look at Trey Turner, Erik, over the last week in DC, his ADP is around 26, 27, give or take. So he's going right after, like, I guess, it's him and Neto in the back end of the second round is where the discussion is. What are your thoughts on Turner this year? Year older, power might not be what like others at the position are, but the speed, the average is all great stuff, obviously.
Yeah, I actually just had the Turner versus Neto debate on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball podcast with Jeff Erickson earlier today, and I was on the Neto side, and that's mostly about fears of Turner's aging. He did do a pretty good job of staving off that aging the past couple years, and he's only going to be 33 next year, so he's not, at that part of his career where you figure this could completely fall apart anytime soon, but he's definitely at the part of his career where you shouldn't expect a repeat of last year's numbers. Again, even though he's more or less managed to do that, I think the elite batting average should still be there. He's still very fast, despite the fact that he's entering his mid 30s. So he makes a good amount of contact. His 16.7% strikeout rate last year was actually his best since 2020 and his best period over a full 162 game season. So making even more contact as he heads into this part of his career. That's going to be key, though, because the barrel rate, 5.8%, that was his lowest mark since 2018. And at his stage of his career, you'd expect the power to continue its slight decline. So I wouldn't be projecting certainly more than 20 homers. I think the 15 he got last year is probably fair. So you're going to need that average to be really good, and you're going to need him to keep running if he's going to justify his spot. Now, I don't have a good reason to think that he's not going to do both of those things, but I think his part of his career, it's easy for guys to just get worse, right? They get hurt more often that age. Maybe the hand-eye coordination takes a little step back and that strikeout rate loses 3 points. Maybe the power continues to slip. I just see more ways for it to go wrong than right. But if it doesn't, still a very reliable guy, even at this stage of his career.
Yeah, I agree. Like that's where I'm kind of at on Trey. I like Trey. I think he's still a very fine fantasy baseball player. I take Neto every time for the same reasons. The age, and I think just the power speed of Neto. I don't know if we haven't seen the 30-30 yet, and I think it's there. So there's a lot of questions, but there's also flaws in his game. So I see both sides of it. But yeah, it's mainly the age. We're on the same page there. But if you happen to land on Turner, it's not going to be a horrible thing. Likely, all said and done. Schwarbombs is back in Philadelphia. They brought the big man back home, re-signed him. 56 home runs last year, threw in 10 steals, which is nuts. Hit 240, which is all you're asking for with him, and 111 runs, 132 RBIs. Just an absolute monster at the plate. He's going around pick 26. He's right around Trey Turner as well over the last week. So you got to pay for him, but it's like the old adage: if he hits for average, everything else is gravy. So where are you at on Kyle Schwarber entering this season?
Very happy that he's back in Philadelphia, both as a Phillies fan, but also as a fantasy drafter. I think he's someone where if he had moved to a new home, A, most parks would be worse for power. So that would be a dent to his fantasy value. And B, there's that whole thing about players in the first year of a huge contract in a new city. We could have been worried about both those things. Now we're worried about neither of them. And so I think my worries with Schwarber are pretty much the same as with Turner, where it's all just age. He'll be 33 this year as well in March compared to June for Turner. And at that age, you figure everything might take a step back. And I suppose there's a bigger worry with him than with Turner because if Schwarber's contact takes a step back, suddenly you're looking at a strikeout rate that could be, 31% or something. Then you start worrying about a very low batting average. But as long as the step back is just mild, I mean, he can go back to 28, 29% in strikeout rate. He was at 27% last year. He's had plenty of success in that range. I do think that the batting averages he's produced the last couple of years, 248 and 240, you're really hoping he can do that again rather than necessarily expecting it. The projections are all down at around 230. But man, the power is as real as it gets. It was a 20.8% barrel rate last year. That's basically, Judgian, right? We're talking about some
Mhm.
of the best power in all of baseball. Judge, I guess, was 25%. All right. Nobody's Judgian, but Kyle Schwarber was third among qualified hitters in barrel rate behind only Judge and Ohtani. If you've got that kind of power, you could even give up, again, a little bit of it in your age 33 season and still be one of the best power hitters in baseball. I don't think the steals, I wouldn't rely on anything there, although he has reached 10 steals twice in 4 seasons with the Phillies. So maybe. I think that, again, it's another case of you're hoping he can just not lose too much at his age, and there's no real reason to think he will. So it's just, are you somebody willing to draft a 33-year-old with one of your first couple picks? And if that's not too old for you, I think Schwarber is still a pretty sensible pick.
Yeah, I think he's outstanding. He showed the power 4 straight seasons. The average continues to be fine. He runs a little bit, ballpark, all the stuff you mentioned. It's I've never really been a I like to get speed early, but he definitely checks boxes that are hard to find elsewhere. As we every season, it feels like power is harder and harder to come by, and he obviously locks that up in large numbers. Excuse me. All right, let's go to your power hitting first baseman, who I saw recently is on his third blood process, whatever he's got going on right now. Can't figure out what that is. But Bryce Harper, another guy, 33. There's a trend here with Philadelphia. Is the opposite of the Nationals when we previewed them. But we got Harper, played 132 games last year, 27 homers, 12 steals, hit 261. Like per game, numbers are great with Harper. It's how many games are you going to get out of Bryce Harper, which seems to be the year to year question, Eric. His ADP is around 53 over the last week, which is much lower than previous seasons. So, what are your thoughts on Bryce Harper this season? A year older, again, still hasn't played a full season in a while, but serviceable for sure. Is he still like one of the elites, though?
Yeah, well, you and Dave Dombrowski have the same question. Is Bryce Harper still elite? And maybe that will have fired him up, and we're going to get a bounce back season from Harper. Unlike Schwarber and Turner, we did maybe see some of the effect of aging for him, although it depends on what numbers you're looking at. If you look at his 3-year trend in OPS, it was 900, 898, and then 844. That looks like a guy who is falling off as he heads towards his mid 30s. But then strikeout rate was actually a point better. The barrel rate was actually 2 points better. The hard hit rate was unchanged. So under the hood, it doesn't really look like Harper took much of a step back. I think he's a pretty reliable player who's going to give you the same numbers that he has the last several seasons as long as he's out there. I just wouldn't expect him to be out there more than, 145 games. That's his max over the last 6 years. So maybe that puts him at the back of that tier of slightly disappointing first baseman from last year. Maybe it puts him a little bit behind Matt Olson for you, but I don't really see big red flags here with Harper. I see a guy who's kept up most of his skills and is aging actually pretty gradually. He is aging, and that might mean he's not elite, as Dave said, but I don't think he's that far from where he's been the last few years. I'm really not that worried about Bryce Harper.
Yeah, I still think he's gonna be very, very good. I'm just wondering if we can get like, do we ever see a day where he gets you 35 plus home runs again? Like, where's I have so many questions. I think we're past that, so it kind of depends on your roster build for me on this one. And I know I don't have a lot of shares because where he's going in drafts is where I'm usually taking like a first pitcher or something like that. It just doesn't fit my mold. But yeah, I don't think he's gone by any means. But you can see the slow I guess, decline, but like that's where my brain's at. Like, to your point, maybe I'm just overthinking it with Bryce Harper, but skills are good. He just got to play most of a season. That'd be nice to see. Alec Bohm, your third baseman, who early in the offseason was rumored to be traded everywhere. I think they just wanted to get rid of Alec Bohm in Philadelphia. Now it seems like, unless I'm not hearing things, that he's settling in at for third base once again, at least for now for the Phillies. One thing he does great is he hits for average, which is like a consistent just source for him. He drives in runs. Mediocre power is always kind of the complaint if there is one for Alec Bohm. But his ADP is around 270, 275 right now. He's cheap. So where are we at on Alec Bohm entering this season with so many question marks surrounding him off and on throughout the offseason?
Yeah, that is quite cheap for Bowman. I guess if he remains a Philly, then the boost he gets from that park, the boost he gets from a pretty good lineup, I think that probably would make him a pretty good value. If he is still going in that range of the draft, maybe he's getting a discount because people are worried he'll be traded somewhere. But I got to say, I'm not at all surprised that he wasn't traded. This is a guy who has 1 year left on his contract, and it's just not that impressive as a real life player. In 2024, he was worth over 3 wins, but according to Fangraphs WAR, he's basically a 1.5 win player every year. That's a slightly below average regular. So no rebuilding team wants 1 year of a slightly below average regular. and a contender. I mean, he just doesn't move the needle that much for them. And what was a contender going to give up to the Phillies? Phillies don't want prospects back for him. So I'm really not surprised at all that Alec Bohm seems to be coming back just to play out the string here. And if he does, he's a fine compiler. He did miss some time with injury last year, was shortened to just 120 games, but had over 600 plate appearances the 3 seasons before that. Spent a lot of time as the cleanup man, and if he were to do that again this year, the RBI totals would be huge. And I think there's every reason to believe that he will be. If you look at the lineup right now, Turner, Harper, Schwarber, Bohm would make a lot of sense as the top four. So if you get a guy who's going to be in there every day, he's going to benefit from hitting in a good park behind those guys. He could easily drive in 97 runs like he did in both 2023 and 2024. I just think that he's so context dependent. And if you strip him from that context and move him to another team that maybe puts him in a worse park, lower down the lineup, maybe doesn't even play him every single day. I mean, he only had a 105 WRC plus last year from a third baseman, a poor defensive third baseman. That's not very good. You got to remember this guy doesn't walk that much, so his real life offensive value is less than his fantasy value. Just not actually that impressive of a player. Hits it on the ground so much that I don't think the power is ever really going to come. He had a 50% ground ball rate last year, led to just 11 homers. He's topped out at 20. I think you're lucky to get 20 from him this season. So I think if he stays in Philadelphia, he is a volume based sleeper of sorts. I just don't think there's a lot more than that. And if he moves, I'd be pretty worried unless it was, say, Colorado or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I've usually been hard out on Alec Bohm just because he doesn't add much to me now. Like I added him in Fab last year when someone dropped him because I needed a third baseman. So I'm like, okay, I'll play that game just to kind of put fillers. But it's just a deep league play for me. There's really no boom to him, as you said, and even the real life aspect. You start naming off the wars and all that. It's a little rough right there. All right, one of the new additions to the Philadelphia Phillies, Adolis Garcia, former Texas Rangers outfielder. They got rid of him. Philadelphia brought him in with open arms. 19 homers, 13 steals last year, hitting 227. The average has dropped in recent seasons. The power has dropped as well. It was a few years ago. He was 27, 25, and we thought this is who he was. He's getting older, but he looks to be the starting outfield for the Phillies because it seems like Nick Castellanos is no longer desired in these parts. ADP is around 230 for Adolis Garcia. How are you feeling about him as a regular on this in this lineup?
From a real world perspective, it's sure nice to trade the worst defensive right fielder for arguably the best one. That is going to help the Phillies win some games. It'll help their pitchers a little bit, sure. From a fantasy perspective, though, they are pretty similar players. Their bats are going in the wrong direction, Garcia and Castellanos, as they head into their mid 30s. Hey, by the way, Garcia will turn 33 this year. Have you heard that
Hey,
before with this
got
team?
a
The
trend.
entire team. Yeah. Apparently, if you're born in 1993, the Phillies want to sign you. So maybe I should call them up there. But
There you go.
Garcia really trending in the wrong direction. You look at his WRC plus last 3 years, 128 to 94 to 83. This is somebody who never made enough contact, needs to hit the ball hard. And to be fair, he still is. The barrel rate, 11.6% last year, hard hit rate of 47%. Those things aren't actually falling off much from his peak, which maybe gives you enough reason to believe that he's going to be closer to that peak level. Somebody who gets you, not just 20 homers, but maybe 25 combined with a poor batting average and some speed. He did actually get double digit steals last 2 years. So there's the potential, but there's also the potential for this to be a disaster. The guy had a 271 on base percentage last year, 284 the year before that. Another guy who just doesn't walk at all. Free swingers like this, sometimes the aging curve looks more like a cliff. I'm not quite seeing that cliff with Garcia because the power is still there. To take a step back, I mean, if you look at a guy with this kind of plate discipline and take his barrel rate from 12% to 8 or 9%, that's just not really a major league corner outfielder. So he's getting very close to not being at all a viable regular. But as long as he stays on the right side of that line, it's a pretty fantasy friendly profile with a power and a little bit of speed. So it's a very low floor option, but I could see the appeal.
Yeah, I've been tempted in a few drafts, let's just say at the ADP for the power of the speed that's yes dwindling, but still, especially in that ballpark and that lineup, I think there's still something left on on the vine, as they say, but I just don't know how much is the problem. Bryson Stott, a player that I've done a pretty good 180 on in the recent seasons. I at first I'm like, okay, he's gonna platoon, little power, little speed, but now it's like it's consistent. We've seen 11 to 15 homers, we've seen over 30 steals twice, a minimum 24. He's hit 280, 245, 257. So the average doesn't crush you. He's got potential to be big, and we saw when Turner got hurt last year, they moved him to short. Like the platoon kind of disappeared a little bit, which maybe it comes back when everyone's healthy. We'll see. But when we're looking at Bryson Stott, you got a little power, you got a ton of speed, and an ADP of around 180. So, what are your thoughts on what we saw from Bryson Stott recently and what to expect this upcoming season?
I think Bryson Stott very much is who he is at this point, and who he is a totally fine player at his point in the draft. I think you don't have to reach for one of those early second basemen because you can get Bryson Stott or a few other guys like him who are going to give you 12 to 15 homers, 25 steals, and an okay batting average. You can get that profile from a few players, but I think Stott is one of the more steady options getting you there. I just don't see any reason to believe he's going to take a step forward in terms of power. I mean, the hard hit rate of 31% and 30% the last 2 years. That this is not somebody who's got hidden 20 homer power that he's just trying to unlock. I think you're capped at about 15, but he makes a lot of contact. The identical strikeout rate of 16.3% the last 2 years hasn't actually translated to a good batting average because he doesn't hit the ball hard. If you hit it often and weekly, you're probably going to run a low BABIP like he has for the last couple of years. So I think he is who he is. He's an okay batting average. He's not zero power, but definitely not a strength there, and he will run. The question, as you hinted at, though, is the playing time. He's not guaranteed to start against lefties, and there is a Phillies infielder who is going to come up at some point this season, Aiden Miller, one of the team's top prospects, could be the third baseman if Alec Boehm does get moved, could push for starts ahead of Stott at second base as well. Aiden Miller bats right-handed. He's only played 8 AAA games, so that's not at all a lock or even a likelihood that Miller is on the opening day roster. But I do think he's going to be a factor for the Phillies at some point this season. And one of the easiest routes to regular playing time would be at the expense of Stott. So you do have to worry a little bit there, but I doubt that Stott would fall into anything less than the large side of a platoon. So in a lot of leagues, a large side platoon guy who has some speed and isn't a total zero elsewhere is pretty useful. I just wouldn't expect anything, any steps forward. I don't think are coming at this point. But hey, at least he's not 33.
Yeah.
He's only going to be 28 this season. So at that part of his career where the aging curve is pretty flat.
True, very true. Misses that boat. Aiden Miller's ADP is around 373 right now for those keeping track at home. Just for fun, you were doing a little comparison debates earlier. Would you rather Bryson Stott or Ozzy Albies?
I think I'd be on Albies there because Albies I'd hope could give you more, right? Albies has given you more in the past. Obviously, if you needed speed, you want Stott or you want, I don't know, Andres Jimenez is the cheaper version because he's coming off a terrible season. But I think that there's potential for a more well-rounded season from Albies, some actual power, some actual average. The floor is lower though. He's had a weird couple years, so I think Stott is the very steady option. You know what you're going to get. Albies much higher ceiling, but also a lower floor.
The other one I'll ask you because I think it's very similar, especially even the playing time concerns. Stott or Luis Garcia Jr.?
Uh, that is a good question because he also has the exact same, like you said, the exact same platoon risk. I think that I would take Stott there, but maybe there's some more hidden ups. I think Garcia could still take a step forward that I'm not seeing with Stott. So I
Yeah.
think I think the median outcome is better for Stott. But if you're in a smaller league where these guys are going near the end of the draft, where you're free to think more about upside than floor, I could see Garcia there. How
Okay.
about you?
Yeah, I'm a Team Garcia. I've always been a soft spot for Team Garcia, but like I said, I've turned my At least I appreciate Bryson Stott. Like I have no problem drafting him, but I'm a Garcia guy. I know he's horrible versus lefties. I horrible. So there's a lot of downtime there. But even like if he plays 140 games, he's gonna give you quite the return in all
Right.
things.
I mean,
So I'll
he
take
could
it.
give you league average power, which a Stott is just
Yep,
not going to do.
exactly. All right, Brandon Marsh. I'm only bringing him up because it seems like every week in waiver wires, everyone's like, Brandon Marsh, they're facing a bunch of righties. Brandon Marsh. Okay, so I want to get your thoughts. Last year, he hit 280, 11 homers, 7 steals. The year before was 16 homers, 19 steals, 250. So I could see why the excitement was there. But all in all, like what we saw last season, a lot more kind of what we usually get from Brandon Marsh. His ADP is 350 ish. Is he strictly a streamer? Or is there like a deep league where this makes sense?
Yeah, if you've got a really deep bench so that you can, bench him during those half weeks or full weeks where the Phillies face a lot of lefties, then he's pretty interesting. I mean, if you look at Marsh on a per game basis, you can dream about a real power speed player. I mean, last year, a little bit down in both of those, but 16 homers, 19 steals in about 3/4 of a season in 2024. Uh, do some simple math there. That puts him around, 2025 over the course of a full season. That would be a really interesting player. Problem is, you are never going to get a full season from Marsh. He is absolutely locked into a platoon. He cannot hit lefties for his career. It is a 581 OPS against lefties with a 38% strikeout rate. This is not a player who, hey, what if they actually give him a chance? Then he could really put up some real counting numbers. So I think he's just locked into being a guy who actually does give you interesting power and speed on a per game basis, but the games played is just not high enough. I mean, in a draft Champions League, for example, though, I definitely don't mind a Brandon Marsh. I think if you have, three outfielders in that part of the draft who are large side platoon guys, hopefully one or two of them will have a friendly matchup that weekend. So I certainly will draft Brandon Marsh, have drafted Brandon Marsh. I just would certainly not expect him to turn into anything more than what he's been.
Totally agree on all fronts there. Like really good drafted hold play. He's a good streamer. Like there's a lot there, but there will be the ceiling. I don't know how high the ceiling is, I guess, but very serviceable, very solid ball player. You mentioned it earlier. JTR is back. He'll be 35 this season. 12 homers, 8 steals, hit 257. Obviously, we have seen the decline taking place with JT Real Muto, and that has resulted in an ADP close to 210, which we have not seen pretty much ever with JTR. So, what are your thoughts now? Because, like I said, we know the decline's there. That's catcher two pricing, which he probably actually fits the mold pretty solid for catcher two. But are we concerned 35? Like, is the fall still happening here that you're at least worried about?
You got to be somewhat concerned, but I think he's being penalized a bit too much in drafts. I don't think that he's actually fallen off that much. You look at, for example, his strikeout rate has actually been 26, 25, 24% the last 3 years. He's slightly going in the right direction. His hard hit rate, 43, 47, 45, not really changing there. So he still makes about the same amount of contact as he did before. He still hits it about as hard as he has been for several years. The actual raw home run total was lower with just 12 last year. He's peaked at 25 in his first year with the Phillies. Has 4 different 20 homer seasons in his career. So maybe we project him for no more than 15 to 18. But this is not a guy who's falling off a cliff as he hits his age 35 season. I would have expected him to by now. The defense certainly. The framing numbers are a lot worse. He's not the guy he used to be, but I think the penalty in the draft pool has been too strong. I think he's closer to being the JT Real Muto of 2, 3 years ago than drafters are giving him credit for. So maybe they're just projecting the age to catch up to him all at once. Maybe there was, a discount because he was a free agent. People were worried, what if he goes to a new place where, maybe it's a tougher hitter's park. Maybe it's not a team that knows him as well and doesn't feel like they owe him 8 starts a week like he often gets for the Phillies. But I think the playing time's still there. I mean, Rafael Marchand's the backup. You're not going to want to give him a ton of at
Yeah,
bats. Real Muto, again, his plate appearances were a little bit off of his peak, but that's because I think he missed a little bit of time. But if he stays healthy, though, he's going to be, top 10 plate appearances at catcher, and his per game value is going to be still pretty good. I actually think Real Muto is a pretty good value this season.
Yeah, I've usually been anti JT Realmuto because his price tag's always been so high, but I am fully on board this season at this price. Like I said, it's a catcher too. He's going to get all the at bats you can imagine as long as an injury doesn't take place, and you can't predict that stuff. Catchers are going to get fluky injuries too. It just happens. He's actually had a few in recent seasons. But yeah, if he's on in the lineup, zero problems at this ADP. Like I really, really like the upside there with JTR. Justin Crawford, one of your youngins, 22 years old. I think he's lost on this team. Little bit of pop, tons of speed, hit for average throughout the minors. Eric, he's expected to have a chance to start the season with the team, and his ADP is around 290. What are we thinking on Justin Crawford this year?
Yeah, I think he's a really smart sleeper pick as long as he stays in that range of the draft. I really liked trying to land him as an outfielder 5. I think he was a value in the very early part of the offseason because the Phillies had said he's going to be an opening day starter. They were going to lose 2 outfielders. Castellanos is not going to come back. That hasn't actually happened yet, but he's not going to be
Yeah,
on the team.
weird.
Uh, Harrison Bader gone as well. So, and Max Kepler too. So even if the Phillies added an outfielder, which they did, Adolis Garcia, there was still room for one more. I don't think they're going to add another, so I'm pretty sure Crawford's going to have the job. Maybe it's a strong side platoon, but in terms of short side platoon center fielders, that would have to be basically Johan Rojas. Are the Phillies going to give a roster spot for that? Maybe. Are they going to take playing time away from a guy who was their first round pick in 2022 to do that? I'm not sure. So I think Crawford really might be in the lineup basically every day. The one thing I would disagree with what you said he has a little bit of power. I don't think so. He's not ever reached double digit homers in any professional season. Fangraphs gives him a future 30 on his game power. Problem is, he's somebody who absolutely pounds the ball into the ground. We're talking 60% ground ball rates. So he
Oof.
turns every pitcher into Framber Valdez. This is not just above average ground ball. This is as bad as it gets. But that means his batting average should be pretty safe. He doesn't actually have that soft contact. It's maybe be average in terms of his impact on the ball. It's just all into the ground. But everybody's got some uncle who says, "Oh, that guy, why doesn't he just always hit grounders and run to first base?" I mean, this is your uncle's favorite player because he's going to hit grounders and run to first base. He has the correct swing for his skill set, and it's helped him hit 334 in the minors last year, 313 the year before that, 332 the year before that. I mean, I wouldn't project a 300 average from him, but he is somebody who I would project quite a good average for as a rookie, despite not having elite strikeout rates. He's usually in the high teens in the minors. This is not some Luis Arias type player. This is not Chandler Simpson, too. Chandler Simpson was running single-digit strikeout rates, so you could pretty reliably say he's going to hit 300. I wouldn't expect that for Crawford, and I wouldn't expect, the possibility of 100 steals if he was in the lineup every day, but I would say he can get you 30, maybe even 40. And I think the average is going to be at least, 265, 270, because I think he's going to put the ball in play at least a league average amount of the time. And he's fast. He's going to beat out some grounders. I think he's going to slap his way to first and steal second a whole lot. And I think that's going to be a fun player to watch. Maybe similar to a Victor Scott. You're hoping for a little bit more with the bat than Victor Scott. Also, speaking of Victor Scott, Scott is a very good defender. Crawford has speed, but is not considered a great defender, although he's also being given the center field job, so the Phillies must think he's okay. There's a chance he's just, Asturi Ruiz-ish when you have speed and no defense, but I don't think so. The Phillies really seem to think he's going to be a viable everyday player. And if he's in there every day, I think he's going to help your batting average and he's going to help your speed quite a lot while hitting, 5 homers.
All right, that's good to know because yeah, I'm bad with all the prospects, so it's a good talking point. I'm going to ask you just real quick, Otto Kemp. We saw him be serviceable when he filled in for injuries. With the Alec Boehm comments, like Otto Kemp could be maybe a power upgrade there at worst. He's got outfield flexibility. I just mentioned that they're not going to really call up Rojas, so it feels like Otto Kemp's got a good spot here on the team. Could be totally wrong. What are your thoughts on his potential usage this season? Obviously, it feels like an injury has to take place, but a pick like 640 in a draft and hold, there seems to be a little bit of legs to that potentially.
Yeah, I would say Otto Kemp enters the year as Brandon Marsh's platoon partner in left field, unless there is an Alec Boehm trade, in which case maybe he sits at third base until Aiden Miller's ready to come up. Yeah, if you're talking pick 600 something, a short side platoon guy who's shown some skills, who's one injury away from more regular playing time, you could do worse. Kemp's an interesting story. He was an undrafted rookie back in 2022 who climbed the minors, but not actually that quickly. He wasn't amazing his first couple of years. He reached the majors in his age 25 season and was actually pretty close to league average bat, 95 WRC plus, enough power to make up for a 31% strikeout rate. It's pretty dicey. I don't see, I mean, maybe if the contact gets way better, then you get somebody who deserves every day at bats. I think he's more of an interesting power bat off the bench who starts against some lefties, though, and I wouldn't really expect much more than that.
Perfect. All right, let's head to the mound. The ace, Christopher Sanchez. My goodness, he was a popular name as draft season went along last year, and all he did was give you 202 innings, 2.5 ERA. Strikeouts were great. The dude was awesome. He is getting Cy Young consideration. ADP's around 27. It's like the four. He's in that fourth, fifth, sixth starting pitcher argument. Depends on who you talk to. Are we in on that this year? Because it feels like either you're all in or you're like, no, the regression is going to suck. So where are you at on Christopher Sanchez?
I am incredibly in to the point where this is the one guy that we're going to talk about today where I am worried that I'm being a homer. I think I've been balanced enough on our
You've been
guys so
very
far. I don't think
balanced.
there's
Yes.
anybody. Yeah, I don't think there's anybody who I'm way ahead of the pack on. Christopher Sanchez, man, I was all over him last year. It worked great, and I'm all over him again. Did you know that Christopher Sanchez had a higher swinging strike rate last year than Paul Skeens? Uh,
Ooh.
Bit of a surprise given that Sanchez, among the SP1 candidates, is not considered to be an elite bat misser. You know, most of the other guys are 29% strikeout rate, 30, 31, 32. Sanchez was just at 26%, but on a per pitch basis, he actually did miss more bats than even Paul Skeens. He did that while having one of the best ball percentages out there as well, just 33%. Uh, really incredibly well rounded as a pitcher, misses a ton of bats, keeps it in the zone, keeps it on the ground better than almost anyone. This is somebody who I thought was already much closer to a Framber Valdez and Logan Webb than people were giving him credit for. That's why I was all over him last year. Now he looks like those guys with extra bat missing ability. I think this is absolutely one of the best pitchers out there, and I would very happily take him as the fourth starter. I did not rank him ahead of Paul Skeens, but man, a lot of the underlying numbers, he looks even better than Skeens did last year. I would be very happy with Christopher Sanchez on all of my teams, and then I would hope that that very brief forearm scare that he had last year turns out to, in fact, be nothing. That's the only worry.
Yep.
But you know, it never rose above soreness, and he came back and was a little bit worse for a month and a half, something like that, but then was excellent for several months to end the year. I think if it never rises above soreness and you show us several months of elite productivity afterwards, I don't think we have to be that worried. And if we're not that worried about injury, I'm certainly not worried about anything else with Christopher Sanchez.
Yep, I'm with you. That's the only thing the slight concern I have is that forearm deal. But I have him as my SP4, I believe, a 4 or 5 at worst. But yeah, I'm a huge fan as well. So not a whole lot to add to that conversation. I think he's for real with that changeup and everything else. All right, let's get to another guy I was all in on last year, and I am pretty excited about again this year. That's Jesus Luzardo. Comes over to the Phillies, so 183 and 2/3 innings, the most in his career. Strikeouts are great. Finished with the 3.92 ERA, had about a 4 or 5 start rough patch, is the nice way to put it. But overall, was really, really good. Uh, ADP is like 65 to 70 right now. So not super expensive. If you wait on SPs, like if you wait, he could be your SP1, but otherwise he could be a nice SP2 option, probably more so, preferably an SP2 option. But what are your thoughts on Luzardo this year? Because I guess the biggest concern I have, if I'm going to have one, is that was quite the workload last year. Do I trust this year's situation with his past injury history? But what are your thoughts on Luzardo?
Yeah, I think that is a real worry. This is not somebody who has proven to be durable, and we shouldn't just take 1 year where he stayed healthy as proof that he's over all that now. That is true, but beyond that, I'm not that worried. It was not actually a 4 or 5 start bad
It
run
was like
last year. It
two,
was
wasn't
literally
it?
just two. Yeah,
Yeah,
his
once I
final
said it out
start
loud, I'm
of
like, it's
May.
2.
Yep.
Yeah.
His last start of May, he gave up 12 runs. His first start of June, he gave up 8. So that's 20 earned runs. He only gave up 80 for the entire season. So a full quarter of the earned runs that Jesus Luzardo allowed were in those 2 starts alone. And then he pretty quickly settled back down. His start right after those 2, he held the Cubs to 1 run in 6 innings, struck out 10, and walked none. He had several strikeouts, 10, walked none on his record last year. After those 2 bad starts, he had a 3.57 ERA the rest of the way, which even his peripherals. So you do have to worry a little bit. Is this somebody who just can't live up to those peripherals? But that wasn't a problem for him in past seasons, like say 2023, when he also had a full season, 32 starts. That was a 3.58 ERA, a 3.55 FIP, 3.72 xFIP, 3.69 Sierra. So this is not a guy who is consistently failing to meet those ERA estimators. So if we're willing to value him around where his ERA estimators were last year, 340 Sierra, 325 xFIP, that's a very, very good pitcher. Somebody with very strong bat missing ability, 28.5% strikeout rate last year. And he pairs that with perfectly fine control as well, 7.5% walk rate. Just from the very obvious way to find pitchers who should be better next year, just looking at ERA minus the ERA estimators, nobody's going to stand out more than Luzardo in his part of the draft. And I'm pretty willing to say that that was probably some sort of pitch tipping issue or something
Yep.
similar, which was being suspected at the time. If that's all it was, I mean, I guess it could come back, but he was not that guy for most of the year. I'm pretty sure that the guy we saw for most of the year is who Jesus Luzardo actually is. So I'm hoping on that good health. Again, we've had good health 2 of the last 3 years, but those are kind of the only 2 years of his career. It's a real worry, but it's kind of the only worry for me. I'm not really worried that the ERA was a bit elevated.
Yeah, I'm with you. I love him. Little scuffle, but they said tip pitching, and hey, looks like that might have been the case. So, yeah, it's just maybe the only concern I could really believe is if you want to worry about the workload increase, but otherwise, love me some Jesus Lizard. Aaron Nola, the newest member of Team Italy. He is going to be 33 this year. We're back. Last year, first real big injury season he's had in pretty much his entire career, it feels like. Otherwise, he's just been a consistent workhorse. He's been getting hit around in recent years. Last year, no exception. Aaron Nola, his ADP right now is a nice 200. He's right around the 200 mark. So I'm not really a Nola guy, but I understand the arguments for liking Aaron Nola. What are your thoughts on him entering his age 33 season?
Well, I missed that news about him joining Team Italy. That's a lot of fun. I'm
Yep.
a big WBC fan. It'll be cool to see him pitch there. I know that often makes fantasy players a bit worried and maybe will lead to a discount for Nola, but the discount's already there coming off a very poor season with an ERA north of 6. You mentioned his age, 33. Well, he's a Philly. Of course, he's 33 years old. Unlike some of those guys we talked about earlier, though, the decline certainly looks like it happened. But if we dig a little deeper, did it really happen? Okay, his ERA jumped from 357 to 601, but the Sierra jumped from 368 to 381. That's almost a tie. The strikeout rate exactly tied, 24%. The walk rate up from 6.1 to 6.9. I mean, that's pretty negligible. Ground ball rate down 2 ticks, but this was not a guy who really performed that much different. He just missed a bunch of time and had horrible luck. I mean, the BABIP up at 315, 11%, all of those things, which we say regress from one season to the next, those all went against Nola. Yes, there's not a lot of upside here. You're not hoping for anything more than him returning to being a very solid, innings eater is not quite right. He was better than an innings eater the last couple of years, but somebody who wasn't going to be a fantasy ace. But just statistically, there's not that much reason to think that he can't get back to being that guy. I guess the velocity was down. His fastball averaged 91.8 last year. It was 92.6 the year before that. All right. But again, the strikeouts and walks were virtually unchanged. I don't see this as somebody who's falling off a cliff. The price tag is falling off a cliff. So while I'm certainly not excited about Aaron Nola, I think he's perfectly fine. He's going to start every 5 days for a pretty good team. He'll get you some wins without blowing up your ratios. He'll strike out a slightly above average number of batters. I think you could do a lot worse.
Yeah, Ryan Bloomfield will love to hear that because he is always King Nola in his neck of the woods. Taiwan Walker seems like he's just filling a rotation spot for now. He's been good at being long man in the pen, getting starts where you need him through 123 innings last year. I'm he's picked 745. Like he's going at the end of a DC right now. But what are your thoughts on his impact on the 2026 season?
If Taiwan Walker has a notable impact on the season, it's because something went wrong for the Phillies. It's because Zach Wheeler didn't come back from his thoracic
Yep.
outlet syndrome nearly as quickly as the Phillies wanted, or it's because Andrew Painter didn't deserve to take a rotation spot, which the Phillies certainly are hoping he will. I think if you see Walker used as anything more than the guy who makes 3 starts here while somebody's on the IL and then goes back to being a long man, I think something went wrong. I think you look at his numbers last year, a 4.08 ERA from your swingman, that's pretty good, but the ERA estimators all in the high fours, a
Yep.
whip of 141. And this is a guy for fantasy purposes. You're streaming him in a nice
Maybe.
start, maybe to hope to get the win, but you're not even going to get strikeouts. He's been, below
Yep.
20% in strikeout rate for 3 straight years. Was at 16% last year. I don't think there's much here.
Yep, I'm with you. You mentioned Andrew Painter. It's a name we've been hoping to see for a couple of years. I bet Philly fans even more so. Big time prospect arm. He's had some injury issues off and on, but looks good to go to start spring. Like looks like you said, the spot's there for him if he can come through. ADP's around 355. What are your thoughts slash expectations on 2026 for Painter?
I think at pick 355, certainly worth taking a shot. This is one where those of us who mostly are just scouting the stat line are in a bit of a tough spot because Painter gave us no innings in 2023 and 2024 as he worked his way back from surgery. And then he gave us 26 starts last year, and they were just incredibly ordinary. And that's probably being kind to him. A 5.26 ERA, 149 whip, the strikeout rate, which was as high as 39% in 2022. The numbers that were inspiring thoughts of, is this the next Justin Verlander? Is he going to debut at age 19? All that. That's the guy who had a 39% strikeout rate as a teen, as high as double A. Last year, 24%. That's barely better than league average. His walks have jumped. They were at 6% in 2022, all the way up to 9% last year. So the control's way worse. The stuff's way worse. If you look at the actual numbers that Andrew Painter has produced, again, in the last 3 years, he didn't give us anything in 23 or 24. There is nothing you can point to and say, I want this guy on my team. Everything is based off his scouting reports from before the injury. And I know that we usually give guys a year, right? Coming back from Tommy John surgery, we say, all right, your first year might be a write off. Okay, let's write off that year. I can get behind that. You just can't point to anything else from the last 3 years that says Andrew Painter is going to have a good season. So, do I feel at all confident in a guy who we last heard good things about in 2022? Not really, but man, the things we were hearing about him were so good. I mean, if he can just get back anywhere close to that level, we have a very good pitcher on our hands. It's the range of outcomes here could hardly be wider. I mean, he could come out, have a terrible spring training, and look like he doesn't deserve a spot, and he could start the year in AAA, and he could not debut at all this year, right? If he has a bad spring and has poor numbers for the first few months, we may not see Andrew Painter this season. Where he's going in the draft, I think is about right. I think the potential upside is there, but again, there's other upside plays who have actually given us something good to look at the last few years. It's so tough to click his name when we haven't had a good performance in literally 3 seasons. But man, if I go the whole year without him on any teams, I'll be pretty upset because the upside is still there, sort of, right?
Yep. No, I agree. It's the upside's got to be there. You're wondering if it's year one back from the injury. Like, does he figure things out this time around? Um, I'm very optimistic, but especially at that price point, because in any draft you take him at, if he doesn't pan out at 355, that's just a drop. You move on, and it is what it is. But the upside to your point could be pretty tremendous. Want to ask you quickly about Zach Wheeler, who I've always loved drafting. His ADP is around 150, obviously with thoracic outlet syndrome. And I think what I heard was like a month and a half, 2 months into the season. I don't know. I've heard different things. What are you hearing on the expectations for Wheeler's return?
Well, there was just a report in The Athletic yesterday which said that Wheeler will be behind the Phillies' other starting pitchers at the beginning of spring training, which we expected, certainly. But the quote was he will not be too far behind. All right. I mean, what can we do with this? He play? It sounds like the Phillies are comparatively optimistic. He has begun a throwing program over a month ago. He is now throwing from 90 feet. So he is doing the things you want to see, and the team is saying he won't be too far behind. Personally, I'm not somebody who likes to draft pitchers who are injured because, we're not really getting many updates about them this time of year. There's still several months of rehab he has to go through, and every single time he gets on the mound, there's a potential for a setback. It's just not really how I like to build my team, given that you're going to have to pay a pretty real price for him still. But I guess the price is not that high, around 150 so far overall in the NFBC. I'm not sure what it is recently, but I can see the appeal of getting, a Cy Young candidate for the last 4 months if he is that guy. Thoracic outlet syndrome is just one of the scariest injuries for a pitcher. So I'm keeping my expectations pretty muted, but the latest noise from the team is, I mean, if he's behind but not too far behind, I think that's a mild positive compared to where we could be at this point, right?
Yeah, I'm all about that. If he's behind but not too far behind at 150, I'm really debating taking that chance because of how good he is. I love Zach Wheeler. I made him my SP1 in recent years, not rankings, but I drafted him as like he's my priority in round like 3 or 4 a lot. So I'm a big fan of what you can do. And at 150, that is going to be quite tempting as more news comes out. Let's head to the bullpen. Your big trade deadline acquisition last year, Johan Duran. The entrance is awesome, and it's finally on a team where he gets to close every game now instead of getting Baldellied in the back of the Twins bullpen. We saw 32 saves last year, 70 innings pitched, electric factory with Johan Duran. ADP's 33, obviously, because closers go super early in the NFBC right now. What are your thoughts on 2026 as the full-time closer for the Phillies?
Yeah, I think it's great. I think he's a legitimate candidate for the closer one. I think I have him one spot behind Andres Munoz in my rankings. I think you could have them in either order. That trade was just great from a fantasy perspective because it meant we have Duran as a true closer, which we haven't had. We've had him as a 90% closer. It also means the Phillies have a true closer. The Phillies, previously under Rob Thompson, have been very happy to go with the committee, but also very happy to go with a real closer when one is there. So I think there's absolutely no worries that Duran's going to fall back into a 90% closer role. I think he's absolutely a lock to be treated as a traditional closer as he was last season. And he's one of the best in the game. Not quite the 33% strikeout rates that some of the guys can give you in the ninth inning, but he was at 28% last year while walking fewer batters than average and producing an elite 65% ground ball rate. Uh, not going to give up homers. You're going to have to beat him through a couple lucky singles, basically. I think he is absolutely one of the most reliable arms in the ninth inning in baseball, and it's great for fantasy purposes that he's in a situation where he's just going to close.
Yep, I love him. Love everything about him. I've always loved the skills. Hated the role with Minnesota, as weird as that sounds, because he was the closer. But yeah, love him in Philadelphia and what they'll use him for there. All right, prospect talk. You mentioned Aiden Miller already. Like that's the main guy everyone's interested in drafting. Any other prospects, like technically and Painter's technically a prospect, but any other prospects that might have an impact in 2026?
Well, and of course, Justin Crawford is still a prospect as well.
Yeah,
Has
that's
not
another one too.
debuted, but
Yep.
is just being given the starting job. So certainly, I think this is going to be a good year for Phillies prospects. But it's mostly going to be Crawford, who's going to be there right away. Hopefully, it's going to be Painter, potentially from the start. I think if Painter has a good enough spring, that job is his. Aiden Miller, who I mentioned, more speed than anything else. He stole 59 bases in 116 minor league games last year, only hit 14 homers, and the strikeout rate was touch worse than league average. So I wouldn't trust him to really give you a good batting average either. So, how interesting of a fantasy option is that? But I do think we're going to see him pretty early. Not sure we're going to see a whole lot beyond those big three other prospects in RotoWire's top 20 that are at least AAA: Gabriel Rincones, Yoniel Corrette, Keaton Anthony, a few names who might make an appearance at some point. But I think the Phillies are going to have a theoretically a pretty good year for rookies, but it's mostly just going to be Miller, Painter, and Crawford. I think we're going to see potentially a lot of those guys. Crawford, though, really is the one where he's got the job. He's got all the upside that comes with being a former first rounder, the son of a major leaguer, Carl Crawford, as well. So
Mhm.
very excited for him. Tentatively excited for Miller and Painter, but I'm not sure you're going to see a whole lot else as far as this season's prospect impact.
Yep, seems like most are going to be up or have been traded recently to fill the
Yep.
gap here. Last question I have for you that I ask every person on these previews: what are your expectations for the Phillies in 2026?
Play the Mets really close all year long and have a very good fight for the division, maybe with the Braves in it too. Can I say that I expect the Phillies to win? I mean, doesn't everybody expect something to happen to the Mets? And if something
Yeah,
happens to the Mets, then the Phillies win it by default. I'm expecting something pretty similar to the last couple of years. I think a 2 or 3 seed that loses to the Dodgers in the playoffs would be a pretty acceptable season given the talent there. It's a team that's got way more downside than upside, unfortunately. Everybody on this team, as I've said throughout the show, is 33 years old, and if they don't age much, then man, it's a loaded roster that should be a top 5 team in baseball, just probably more fifth than first, but the downside here is pretty high. If any of those 33-year-olds, especially if multiple of them suddenly start to look old, then you're looking at a team that's, fighting for the 6th seed. So I think that I'll say that I expect them to win the division, but not due to anything other than the Mets have to have something happen to them, right?
yeah, I think the Phillies should be the favorite. Obviously, now if the Mets go get another starting pitcher because they kind of need another one if they really want to look at that rotation. But the Mets are going to be interesting. I love the Phillies lineup a lot more, and the Mets is good still. Not knocking that, but yeah, I think for now on paper the Phillies look like the favorites. Obviously, that's why we play the games, and 162 games is a very long season for a lot of things to take place. So we'll see. Like heck, the Marlins. I did the preview with Chris Towers, and the Marlins were technically in the playoff eligible until like 10 games out. So like a lot can happen in these seasons right now, and I think the Phillies should be fine. But yes, eventually that age is going to catch up with these guys. Just hopefully not this season. All right, we're going to wrap it up there, Eric. Absolute pleasure having you on the show to discuss the Phillies. Before we head out of here, remind everybody where they can find you and what you got coming up.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me on. You can find me on Twitter at Erik_Halterman. That's Eric with a K. You can find my work at rotowire.com on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball podcast, and starting in just a couple weeks on Fantasy Sports Radio on SiriusXM.
Yeah, you'd think they'd be done with football by now, but they still let it linger, linger, and linger. But yeah, trust me, I know I've played that game with them forever. But everybody, check out Eric. Great stuff, great content, great on all the different waves you can hear him on and the writing. So go check him out. And thanks for joining me, man. Really appreciate it. Everybody, this was Benched with
Thanks a
Bubba
lot. Go Phils.
episode. Yes, go Phils. There is Benched with Bubba episode 822. Catch y'all next time.